we're about to dive into one of the most powerful stories of personal transformation ever told, the story of Jacob. And this isn't just some ancient tale. It's a deep, deep look at what it really means to confront your past to become someone completely new. So just imagine this for a second. 20 years. 20 years have gone by, you've built a whole new life for yourself, you've got a family, you're successful, but now you have to go back. You have to face the one person you betrayed more than anyone, the person who literally swore they would kill you. What's going through your head? Well, this is the exact spot Jacob finds himself in. So this brings us to the trickster's terrifying return. Jacob, his name literally means deceiver, is finally heading home after 2 decades away. But home isn't some safe harbor. Nope. It's the one place where his biggest fear, his brother Esau, is waiting for him. Okay, so let's do a quick recap of how we even got here. 20 years ago, Jacob pulls the ultimate trick. He cheats his twin brother Esau out of his inheritance and the family blessing, and he has to flee for his life. During those 20 years, he works for his uncle, gets married, and builds a massive family and fortune. And now, God's telling him it's time to go back to the promised land. But that means it's time to face the music. Jacob tries to smooth things over, send some messengers ahead, but the news they bring back is just terrifying. Esau is coming to meet him all right, and he's bringing 400 men with him. Now, you don't bring 400 men to a family reunion. That sounds like an army. And the text says Jacob was thrown into great fear and distress. You think? So all his cleverness, all his tricks, they're useless now. Jacob does the only thing he can think to do. He prays. And this prayer, it's just raw. He is absolutely terrified, not just for himself, but for his family. It's this moment of complete vulnerability where Jacob knows he is utterly dependent on God to survive this. So after sending his family and all his wealth ahead, basically as a giant gift to appease Esau, Jacob ends up all alone in the dark. The external battle he's been dreading is about to get completely upstaged by a much, much stranger struggle, one that comes from within. Think about this scene. He's sent everyone and everything across the Jabbok River. It's just him, alone with his thoughts, his regrets, his fears, under a pitch-black sky. The stage is set for something really strange to happen. And then, out of absolutely nowhere, a figure steps out of the darkness and a fight breaks out. Not an argument, not a debate. We're talking about a physical, all-night wrestling match. This goes on for hours, this grueling brawl, and it doesn't stop until the first light of dawn. Which, of course, brings up the big question. Who on earth is this mysterious opponent? The text is so cagey about it, just telling us Jacob wrestled a man. And that ambiguity, well, it just makes the whole thing even more mysterious. Now, the Bible itself kind of drops clues in different places. Right here in Genesis, he's called a man. But later, the prophet Hosea calls him an angel. But Jacob himself comes to the most staggering conclusion of all. He believes he has been wrestling directly with God. And here's where things get really cool. Just a beautiful piece of literary art in the original Hebrew. Take a look at these 3 words. You've got Yaakov, that's Jacob, the person. Then there's Yabok, the river, which is the place. And then Ya'abek, the Hebrew verb for he wrestled. You hear that? They all sound almost the same. It's this incredible wordplay that perfectly weaves the man, the place, and the action into one single pivotal event. It's just brilliant. As the sun comes up, the fight hits its climax. The stranger wants to leave, but Jacob, who now has a dislocated hip from the fight, refuses to let go. He's clinging on for dear life, and he demands a blessing. What he gets, though, is so much more than that. He gets a brand new identity. This slide just leads it out so clearly. His old name, Jacob, means he grasps the heel, which is such a perfect description of his life as a supplanter, a trickster. But his new name, Israel, well, that means something completely different, something he earned this night. His opponent says to him, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." This is huge. It's not just a new nickname. This name, Israel, is going to become the name for an entire nation, a people whose very identity is wrapped up in this intimate, difficult, transformative struggle with God. So let's be really clear. This is not just a name change. This is a fundamental rewiring of who he is. The guy who lived by his wits, by his deception, he's gone. And in his place is a man who wrestled with the divine, got wounded, and still refused to let go until he was blessed. He is a changed man. So you might be wondering, how does this all-night divine smackdown connect back to the very real problem of Esau and his 400 men? Well, as we're about to see, that connection is literally everything. Jacob decides to name the spot where this all went down. He calls it Peniel. And in Hebrew, Peniel means the face of God. And this idea, this image of seeing a face, is the key that unlocks the whole rest of the story. He calls it Peniel because, as he puts it, he saw God face to face. And, amazingly, he survived. I mean, in his worldview, that kind of encounter should have been a death sentence. He has looked into the face of God and lived to tell the tale, even if he's walking away with a limp. Okay, now watch this. The very next day, he finally meets Esau. It's the moment of truth, and Jacob says this incredible thing to his brother. For to see your face is like seeing the face of God. Wow. The connection is just unmistakable. Because he first wrestled with the face of God in the dark, he's now able to see the face of God in his brother, his enemy. And the result? It's just staggering. The attack Jacob was so sure was coming, it never happens. Instead of revenge, he gets grace. Esau doesn't order an attack. He runs to Jacob, throws his arms around him, kisses him, and they both just stand there and weep. A 20-year-old wound healed in a moment of forgiveness. So what do we take away from all this? From this story of wrestling and renaming and reconciliation, why does it still pack such a punch for us today? I think the central lesson is this. The road to fixing things with others runs right through fixing things with yourself. Jacob couldn't make peace with Esau until he had first wrestled with who he was and who God was. The external conflict could only be resolved after the internal one was settled. This story just teaches us so much. That our worst crises can actually be the source of our greatest growth. That the most important battles we fight aren't out there. They're in here. And that a real change in who we are can open the door to healing relationships in ways we could never have planned or predicted. And all that leaves us with one final thought. Jacob walked away with a limp for the rest of his life, a permanent physical reminder of the struggle that changed him forever. And it just makes you wonder, what are the struggles in our own lives? The difficult, painful, wrestling in the dark moments that have the power not just to hurt us, but to completely remake us.